is Thursday, the 5th of October, 2017, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason, and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK, and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello. We went to see a weird comedy show.
We went to see a comedy show. It turned out to be a weird comedy show.
Okay.
We went to see a good comedy show,
Yes.
and then went to see another guy afterwards.
Yeah, so we went, it was the Liverpool Comedy Festival thing, which I don't know how big that actually is, but there's a few things knocking around on it. And we went to see Chris Foster, who used to be the lead singer of a band called The Time Machine, who we saw at Indie Tracks one year.
Okay.
And he came on stage and he was wearing a full tiger costume.
Right.
I didn't refer to it at all.
Right.
None of the music was tiger-based.
Okay.
And he just carried on doing his normal act. And that's how he performed The Time Machine every time. He just did this, like, increasingly tatty tiger costume without talking about the fact that he was in a tiger costume. He's just a guy from Lancaster with a kind of a fairly sort of flat and understated Lancastrian delivery.
Sure.
In a tiger costume. So he used to be in that band, and then he went and did sort of like stand-up type shows, really. So we went to see him. We've seen him a couple of times, and he was good. He's very gentle but very enjoyable. He has a song about the Cumberland Pencil Museum.
Right. Nice.
About how there's lots of
Niche.
pencils there. You really should see him. He said it's the place to be.
Did he rhyme see him with museum?
He did rhyme
Is
see
that
him with
way?
museum.
All right,
He did.
okay.
He said it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
place to be. He said,
As in pencil.
he said the thing about the museum is you're just drawn there.
I
it's all
see.
good. It's all
He's
fine.
worked hard on this.
He has worked hard on this. I'm not that hard. But he has worked on it. But lovely guy as well. What was weird was we were sat down having a drink beforehand and he was just wandering about and he recognised us. He's oh, hi, yeah, lovely to see you again. Did you go to Indie Tracks this year? Because we saw him at Indie Tracks the other year on a train, and I bumped into him in Edinburgh as well as he was like flying for a show, and he recognised me from the other side of the street and said, oh, hi, and I walked over and had a little bit of a chat with him. So it's lovely.
You being recognised by a famous person.
Yes, yeah, just like one of our listeners
Although,
once
to be
was in
fair,
Edinburgh.
yeah, that also, I didn't mention this on the show after we came back from Edinburgh, but I randomly recognised a listener on the street in Edinburgh.
Okay.
Not a listener you've seen in real life before.
No, I've never met them before.
No, and a listener who did not recognise you.
No.
So
Okay, that's
we're walking
interesting.
down the street and you start pointing at a stranger and slowing down to a point where you're pointing at his face and staring him in the face. And you were looking at him, I would say, for about 3 seconds before he clicked on who you were. So it took a while for him to realise who had just recognised him.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, who's this
that,
person?
that must have been an awkward
Oh,
3
it's Alice.
seconds.
It was awkward for me. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is going on here? Yeah.
I was listening to the show. I'm
Yeah?
friends with him on Facebook. I recognised his face.
Okay.
From a
Perfectly
profile
normal.
photo.
Perfectly normal. So we saw Chris Foster and he was very, very good. And it was £5 a ticket for Chris Foster or £6 if you also saw the show afterwards. And
It was the
worked,
guy who'd organised the two shows.
Yeah. And it worked the other way as well. So there was
so
a guy called Alistair.
It was £5 for one show, £5 for the other show, or £6 for both shows.
Exactly, yeah.
I
So we
see.
thought, well, for the
Right.
quid, then
Yeah,
we might as
yeah,
well
yeah.
throw in on this.
And we'd seen his name around when we'd been up to the Fringe Festival.
We had
and-
very specifically seen his name
Yes.
around. We hadn't seen his show around. We
No.
did not see his show.
We didn't see his show.
We didn't do any of his comedy.
We
Spoilers.
saw his name.
It was yeah. So it started, and we thought, all right, he's going to go somewhere here. He did not go somewhere there. It was
pretty bad.
Nicola was angry. Nicola was legitimately angry.
Yeah.
We saw someone in the audience who'd fallen asleep.
Yeah, completely fast asleep.
We saw someone else in the audience who was so uncomfortable watching it that he'd taken his cap off and was hiding his face behind his cap, and he was like all sort of scrunched up in a little kind of like folded arms, like doing anything he could to avoid how awful it was. It was just the worst bit of it, I think. I mean, it wasn't very well written. There was like one or two orchid jokes in there.
There was also a terrible pun repeated 3 times that didn't even work as a pun.
Yeah, there was a dressage pun where it was like the first one was like dressage to impressage.
He put on a little horse's mask and danced around.
Okay.
Yeah, danced around.
Okay.
And then he pretended to be James Bond in a horse's mask, and it was dressage to kill. But the film was licensed to kill. And dressage isn't really that much of a pun on dressed. It sort of is.
Yeah.
But once if it was like he did something that was dressed to kill, but at this point you're you're punning dressage on licensed.
Yes, that
Doesn't really work.
doesn't work.
And then he put on the horse's mask and was drinking out of a china cup, listening to Tchaikovsky, and it was fancy dressage. Fine. Absolutely fine. But the only thing that I thought was an actual joke in there, really, was where he started a pass the parcel type game, and it was clearly some sort of can, and it passed all the way around, and it got to Nicola, as it turns out, because I think he'd recognised that Nicola was not enjoying things. He thought, I'll single her out, this'll embarrass her, and it did not embarrass her. But she opened it up, and it was a can of ravioli, tinned ravioli.
Right.
And he said, pasta parcels. That's fine, because ravioli are pasta parcels.
Pasta parcels.
So that
Okay.
if that's where he's starting from, he went on from there, fine. He did not go on from there. He went down. And the worst thing about it was he continually forgot large parts of his show.
Right.
But then didn't just do them in a different order. It was like, hang on, I've forgotten a bit there. I need to go back a second. So it'll be funnier later. And then he went back and did a bit, and it wasn't funnier later. He could have just finished the bit he was on,
yeah,
and then did the bit he'd forgotten, and it would have made no difference.
Okay.
And they got right to the end, and he started handing out balloons for some sort of big finale. And as he was handing them out, he went, I forgot to set this up. I didn't say the bit that these refer to. All right, we're going to do it anyway. I was like, oh my God, you've forgotten the ending of your show.
Forgotten to set up his ending.
Now, bear in mind, this was his Edinburgh show. So he'd done this at Edinburgh
every
for
night.
22 nights.
Yes.
And presumably done it before then, although not on the strength of what we saw.
Good Lord.
And then we looked up a review of him, and the review said, for a previous year's show, it might have been all right if he didn't forget large chunks of his material.
Right.
Like, Jesus Christ, just put some effort into remembering it.
Okay.
Yeah. God,
Okay.
it was so bad. It was so bad.
I mean, we can't talk about that after our efforts in London in the last couple of weeks, but we can't say any more about that.
No. And I would say that if I had been doing that for every day for August, then I probably would have had it down by then, at that point. So that wasn't good. My favourite bit of the lot of it was that obviously we paid £1 for that. Warren hadn't seen Chris Foster, so Warren had paid £5 for that. So
Nice.
that was the most funny thing about it.
That is quite funny, though, and I can see that having wound Warren up.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was also quite angry coming out of it. Although he had a great time sat at the back with Laurie and Karen whispering jokes into their ear about his jokes and making them giggle. So
Yeah. But it was bad because he got a couple of heckles. And the first time he got heckled, I thought, all right, guys, don't heckle him. And then the next couple of times, yeah, fair, fine, go for it. And at one point, he got heckled by someone throwing a line. He said, well, actually, my punchline was better than that, and you'll never hear it. Actually, that's not true. I'm going to say it now. And it wasn't better than theirs. The heckle was better. The heckle was substantially better. Yeah. So that's what we did on Friday night.
Wonder if comedy's maybe not this guy's calling.
Well, he's been doing it 7 years. Because he did say...
he'd been to Edinburgh 7 years.
I spent 7 years getting good at this.
Yeah.
His whole show as well was about how he had like a relationship and his pet cat and his comedy, but he broke up. His relationship ended when he dumped her, and this was like a sympathy thing for him. It's like I got down on one knee and dumped her, basically is what he said, something like that. And she kept the cat, so now all I've got left is my comedy. And we're like, I've got some news for you there, mate. Got a little news for you there, mate.
Are you sure that was a bit and not just a tragic admission on stage that this is literally all he has in his life?
I don't know that the lines between those two scenarios are so blurred that I think they're impossible to extricate. But he did point out, like, I've died on stage a lot of times to get good at doing this.
Okay.
These might be witty put downs, or like not witty, but they might be like slam dunk put downs for hecklers. If you're good at what you do, if you're bad at what you do, this is very much bouncing back right in your face. Long-term listeners will probably have noticed something about the show, the type of stories that we cover here. So typically, we'll report on an investigation that we've been along to, or we'll track down a study that's been covered in the news and then point out how the study was conducted and what it actually found and how the reporting doesn't actually match the findings or the methodology of the study or why the study was flawed. Maybe we'll dig through a new pseudoscience product and look at the claims that have been made for it and what the evidence is behind those claims. What we tend not to do is offer quick reactions, hot takes, reviews of what might be going on in skepticism at the moment. For me, that's intentional. I don't know about you guys, but that's intentional because I like this show to be something that isn't just about skepticism, but it's a show that actually does skepticism. We're doing original work as we do this. It's not just here is some work someone else has done and here we are just reporting on it and sort of co-opting that. And honestly, the idea of wanting to get involved with the latest drama makes my fucking skin crawl. Don't talk the talk, do the work, and talk about that. That's always been my kind of mentality when it comes to this show. But today, I do want to take a very temporary departure from that rubric to talk about something that's happened in skepticism, and more broadly, something that seems to be happening in skepticism ongoing. So, America, what the fuck? What the fuck? It's only been a month or so since Michael Shermer's Skeptic magazine saw it fit to publish a 3,500-word, entirely uncritical, 100% credulous review of Milo Thingy's book, despite it having nothing at all literally to do with skepticism. And now there's another clear sign that things are not heading in a good direction there. Some of our listeners might be aware. Many of them, I think, won't be aware for reasons that I'll probably come back to. But last weekend, the conference held by Mythicist Milwaukee invited a YouTuber by the name of Carl Benjamin to speak at their Myth Information Atheist Conference. Carl likes to be known by his pseudonym Sargon of Akkad, but I'm going to continue calling him Carl because this isn't World of Warcraft. This is the real world where actions have consequences and adults in society have responsibilities. Carl has been interviewed by Thomas Smith, host of the Serious Inquiries Only podcast, and a very compassionate and thoughtful interviewer. I'm actually a big fan of his work. I don't know if you listen to his shows.
Yeah, I listened actually to his review of the piece from Skeptic magazine. Where he had Eli on talking through the paper in some detail and rebutting the claims specifically in that paper, and then had one of the authors on the paper and challenging him on, okay, you made all these like really dodgy claims in this paper, and watching the author kind of back down. I thought Thomas was very good. He was a firm but polite interviewer. Really got an awful lot of time and respect for him.
Yeah, I really like his stuff. I mean, even that one episode, which could fit perfectly into the narrative that I'm talking about right now, perfectly into the pattern of what we're seeing happening right now, that whole Skeptic magazine piece. What I liked was you have one of the authors, Robert Lindsay, on the show saying, well, have you seen these ridiculous papers that get published in social sciences? And he's citing these examples, or he sends an email through afterwards of the examples of ridiculous papers. And so Thomas looked, and they're all taken from one Twitter account, which is pulling up ridiculous examples of social science studies. And then when you look at the studies, they've been cited by no people. So this is not reflective of the social sciences generally. These are not seminal works. These are fringe pieces that clearly nobody's got any interest in.
Which you get in every field.
Yeah, also some genuinely interesting work that was being cited in there and then dismissed. So there was one paper that I remember very clearly, which was something like crocodiles promote male hegemony.
And this has been ridiculed by people saying, well, crocodiles are a tool of the patriarchy for teaching how males should behave. And it's like, read the fucking paper. That's not what it was saying.
Yeah, the paper was I thought was a genuinely fascinating paper where they'd studied people at zoos, and they'd noticed that parents, when talking to their children, referred to the aggressive animals using male pronouns and the fluffy animals using female pronouns, and that was what the paper was meaning about it reinforcing.
Yeah, and it's an is not ought, is that this is what is happening. This is not what should be happening. It's not like we should use crocodiles to teach patriarchy. That's not what this was saying. And I've heard other skeptics even citing that exact same tweet from this bullshit account as evidence that social science is bullshit. I mean, League of Nerds, exactly the same thing. Well, why are they asked about what people think about crocodiles? They're not asked about what people think about crocodiles. They're just saying, have we noticed that whenever you talk about cats, the cat you assume is a she and the dog you assume is a he, and what does this mean about the way that we think about men and women?
Yeah.
That's what it's saying, and it's a worthwhile observation. So back to Milwaukee. I wasn't there. That's key to put up front. But I have seen videos of key moments. And even beyond that, I think even without access to the information that was shared, I think there's enough cause for concern here without being in the room. I'm not one to criticise from a distance, having no experience and no understanding of things. I normally eschew doing that. But I think there's enough here that there are enough kind of clear signs that there are questions to be asked.
But also sometimes an outside interpretation is quite important. You can't just assume that because you're inside a conference bubble that it doesn't have repercussions outside.
I think that's true, but what I wouldn't want is for someone who, for example, had never been to QED, criticising something they assumed was said at QED, even though they were never there in the first place. It's not a fair reflection unless you've got very clear evidence of what was being said and things like that. I think that's just a very lazy form of scepticism. That's as bad as anything else, really. This interview between Thomas and Carl was listed as a discussion of contemporary sociopolitics, which is a kind of ludicrously grand title, not just for what it turned out to be, but also for what it could ever really have been. You know, that's such a grand title. You need to be pretty qualified to talk about those things. And I'm not sure that... I'm sure Thomas would say he didn't have the qualifications for that. And I'm not sure Carl would say he didn't have the qualifications for it, but I would argue that there's an element that should be reversed, really. The moment I think it's most exemplary of the direction that this discussion took is when Thomas quoted a tweet of Carl's in which he tweeted at a British MP and a survivor of sexual assault saying, "I wouldn't even rape you, Jess Phillips, hashtag anti-rape threats, hashtag feminism is cancer." Now, clearly, in itself, that's enough to single someone out pretty comfortably as an undeniable cunt. Mm-hmm. But the most shocking thing was that the way in which the audience cheered and whooped and hollered in support of Carl and this edgy, transgressive act of tweeting an ugly rape joke at a survivor of sexual assault in order to silence her and belittle the campaign she was promoting. This pathetic line had the approval from plenty of people in the audience. And Thomas, you can see in the video, is rightly stunned and horrified. He told the audience as much, and it was hard for him to hold it together after that, as far as I can see.
That was what really surprised me watching that video as well, is, okay, there's an asshole on stage at a Skeptic conference. It happens sometimes. Happens at QED sometimes. We invite the wrong guy, we put the wrong person on a panel, or that didn't work out well, and we all beat ourselves up about it afterwards. But that the audience then whooped and hollered and cheered in support of this guy, that was like, whoa, this is not just... There is an arsehole at... there are many arseholes.
There are many arseholes at a Skeptic conference, that's it, I think. Because, I mean, it's been less than 40 hours since the event, at the time of recording at least, and it's understandably raised a lot of questions. Plenty of people are taking as evidence that the entire skeptical movement is rotten, or maybe the entire atheist movement is rotten, or both, depending on whether Mythicist Milwaukee sees itself as a skeptical organisation or an atheist organisation, or either or neither, I suppose. I wasn't aware of this event prior to their booking this bell end to speak, so I can't really speak for what they do. But they're certainly adjacent enough to the skeptical movement for to tar all of us with the same brush to a degree here.
And on their speaker profile for Carl, he was referred to as a skeptical thinker and using evidence.
On the bio that he'd written for himself, he called himself a skeptic.
But what I'm saying is they were positioning this as a skeptical examination. Even if they were considering themselves an atheist conference, this session they considered to be within the realm of skepticism. And now I think they're wrong, but they were pitching this as a skeptical session.
Absolutely. And I think it's certainly in the movement enough for it to reflect on the entire movement, and for the entire movement to do some reflection, I think. I actually listened to an interview of the organisers on the Science Enthusiast podcast, Natalie Newell and Dancer podcast, and they admitted in part that they booked him, Carl, because they wanted to get some interest in their event, because attendances at skeptical conferences in the US have been down, and they want to try and get some ticket sales, some entertainment, some buzz going. Now, obviously, I mean, I organise Skeptic events too. I run the MSS events with you guys here, and and the rest of the MSS board. And I run QED with you, Mike, and the rest of the QED board. And by and large, I think we keep our comments and criticisms about other events private. I know I personally would rather talk to an organiser privately than make a big song and dance online publicly where everybody can see it. Because I think we are all under one tent, largely. And it's not a very big tent at that. And there's the old adage about it being better to keep people in the tent pissing out than it is to have them outside the tent pissing in. But that adage only holds true until someone brings a turd into the tent. And that's what's happened here. I think it's an inexplicable and totally irresponsible booking, and especially to say that, well, we did this in order to get, because attendances have been down and we wanted to get enough buzz. Well, why do you think attendances are down? And how is attendances going to be next year and other events when people think that this is what the skeptical movement is?
Yeah.
I must admit, I've been thinking about this a lot in the 24 hours since I first heard about it. It's been on my mind an awful lot, and I think it's because it raises some important issues and important questions, I think, really. Chief among them for me is why the fuck this Carl guy was invited to speak in the first place. And I have to admit, I hadn't heard of this guy at all until very recently.
Nor had I.
When a friend asked me what I thought of him. And I explained I had no clue who he was. And my friend was surprised because they'd assumed that Carl was well known in skepticism. Because he calls himself a skeptic, he's got a large online following. So he must be really known in skepticism. Now, I'm not saying that if I don't know who you are, you're not worthy of people's time. That's not what I'm saying in the slightest. Far from it. I'm sure there are absolutely loads of amazing activists doing great work around the country, around the world even, that I've just not had the pleasure to meet yet. But I do skepticism for a living. It's literally my job. And part of my job is to travel around the country, travel around the world even, meeting skeptical groups, meeting skeptical activists. Part of my job involves getting to know the people who are doing skeptical work and finding ways to help them or work with them. On top of that, I co-run one of the biggest conferences in the skeptical world, and I guess in the atheist world to a lesser degree. And we're always looking for speakers. His was a name that just never come up at any point, and that in any context. And one of the main reasons for that, I think, is that I don't think he's a skeptic. And to be clear, that's not me pulling a no true Scotsman fallacy here. Take a look, as I have recently, through some of his back catalogue. You can see him putting forward the conspiracy theory that Adolf Hitler faked his suicide. And you can see him defending the Pizzagate conspiracy theory by saying child sex rings are common amongst Democrats in America. Well, without specifically saying there's one located in the basement of a pizza restaurant. But certainly, that's what the conspiracy is. And to say all this kind of stuff happens a lot is to support that conspiracy theory broadly, if not directly. He's promoted New World Order conspiracy theories. Leaving all that aside, his conspiracy theory promotion aside, if you look at what work he's done, it's mainly around his opinions on left-wing politics and why he doesn't like feminism. I don't see what in there makes him a skeptic. You know, as skeptical credentials go, his seem to extend no further than the bit where he calls himself a skeptic in his bio. His words and his actions seem to tell a completely different story. Personally, I'd suggest he's a two-bit contrarian, the cheapest of all possible positions and the easiest way to amass followers and to crowdfund dollars these days. Say something outrageous, farm the controversy. Have you said something too far? No problem, you were just being provocative. Obviously, it's just a joke. Someone else saying something you disagree with? Easy. Find the worst possible interpretation of their viewpoint and then beat that straw man like a Patreon piñata until it showers you with coins. Because while every one of your dog whistles is just a provocative joke or a question you were just asking, anyone you disagree with is by definition deadly serious about whatever interpretation of their belief you happen to find. And all this wouldn't matter, except that this is a pattern we're seeing a fair amount of at the moment. Would-be edgy commentators offering nothing of value but merely stoking outrage for profit and building an army of followers along the way. And those people who whooped and cheered in that room, you've got to question whether they were going to that conference before he was speaking or whether those were his people coming to see him speak. And anyone who disagrees with any of their doctrines in any way is labelled part of the regressive left or an SJW in order to silence any dissenting voices that might threaten their echo chamber. There'll be probably listeners even now who've heard me say that I find the adulation of these supposedly edgy characters to be antithetical to skepticism, and they'll have written me off as another snowflake SJW simply to avoid examining their own beliefs here. And I think it's important to keep examining the beliefs in the people that we follow and evaluate whether we think there's value there. That said, I'm not going to be all Pollyanna about this and pretend that this is solely a problem for the US. I'm sure there are plenty of people here in the UK who have got views that are just as dodgy. Unfortunately, I'm sure that a depressing percentage of those people will be guys. A depressingly high majority of those people will be guys. In fact, we've even had someone with pretty similar views appear as part of a panel at QED once before.
That's true.
We had Brendan O'Neill from the magazine, Spiked. And from the outside, and especially to people who didn't see that particular panel and might never have been to QED, this might look like the UK scene is just as welcoming to pound shop provocateurs as the US is. For what it's worth, I don't think that the situation was analogous. I mean, I'm obviously not going to think it's analogous, but I don't think it was. Carl was invited to speak in Milwaukee, and then later an interviewer with more sceptical views was added to handle the situation. Whereas our panel was put together first, and the people on the panel decided they wanted to have someone there to reflect the views that they were discussing, and asked us to invite Brendan, because the panel was about the idea that scientists are slaves to scientism because science is a new religion. And that's a nonsensical view that the panel didn't want to strawman when they dismissed it. So for me, I think that's a little different. The bigger difference was that the audience knew that they were going to see Brendan's views challenged. And when Brendan went off topic to say contrarian and pseudo-provocative bollocks, the audience groaned and shifted and called him out on it. They didn't cheer. They didn't lap it up and beg for more. This was an external belief examined in relative captivity, a test tube of toxin handled under relatively lab conditions. For what it's worth, I think it was a misstep. I think it was a mistake. And it took place in 2013. I think there's no way I'd have wanted that to happen now. I don't think there's any way we'd have that panel now, given how much of that pseudo-nihilistic style is behind the alt-right and their rise. Yeah. I think it was a different time.
As a QED board, following that panel, we talked about it and decided that actually, you know what, we're not sure that debates is the right format for QED to be putting forward.
Well, debates I think would be, but not that type of debate. Not where we have someone who is objectively wrong coming that the audience will all fully disagree with. Let's say.
If we and we've not done a debate subsequently at QED, partly for this reason. We talked about it at the time and said, okay, if we can find a debate where there is a genuine area of scientific controversy, and we've got somebody promoting a evidence and science-based platform with one conclusion and another person promoting a science and evidence-based platform, but they come to a different conclusion, that's a reasonable debate to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the debate that we have, the only debate that I can recall is actually having put on at QED, which was Brendan and mostly Robin Ince, although there were other people on that panel, but it was largely monopolised by Brendan and Robin. I don't think that's the kind of debate that we had. I think it was a mistake for us to have put it on. It was a mistake that we learned from and that we've moved on.
Yeah, exactly. And the particular person that we had there, there's no way, even if we'd never had that debate before, if that was coming up now, there's no way we'd be having that debate now because the culture has changed so much in the last 4 years that pseudo-nihilistic style that is Brendan O'Neill, that is Carl of Swindon, that is all these other people, these edgelords, that is so prominent now that we wouldn't want to platform that at QED. I don't think there's any value in it, even as an opposition to be debated against.
No, and that came through, I think, at the debate that we had with Brendan at QED. Is I don't think the audience got a lot of value. I mean, they got some entertainment value of watching Robin getting really annoyed.
They got the cheap entertainment of an argument,
but that was, as you say, cheap is the right word for it. There was entertainment value there, but it was below what I would expect QED to be putting out. And as I say, we looked at that, we reflect on that as maybe that wasn't our finest hour, and we've tried to do better subsequently.
Yeah, exactly. But so here's what I think is going on here, or at least part of what's going on. There's a million things going on, but here's one of the elements that I think is going on. I think the label skeptic has been co-opted in part by people who are coming at it from a very different perspective to us. They're not using it to say that their beliefs are provisional based on the availability of evidence, or that they're trying to ensure that they're putting forward ideas and arguments that are as free from bias and broken logic as possible. They're using the label skeptic as a way of saying, hey, I'm edgy, counterculture, and provocative. And a huge amount of them seem to use that label in order to complain about identity politics, which is really ironic, given that they identify as skeptics despite having almost no attributes of a skeptic, but they're the ones decrying identity politics. In short, they're not skeptics, they're just cunts with someone else's badge on. And to a degree, I think it's a bit like if a lot of neo-Nazis started calling themselves jockeys and making videos about how much of a jockey they are. At some point, I imagine people would start saying that jockeys seem to be really racist nowadays, even though most of the jockeys who are doing the bulk of the racism don't actually ride horses or race or wear colourful hats. No, they just call themselves jockeys, but now nobody wants to go to the Grand National. And if you allow me to go one analogy further, I think they're kind of identity locusts. They swarm in, and if you're not careful, they're going to consume everything. And when they've had as much as they can manage, they'll move on to a new, fresh identity. But when they leave, you might find that they've destroyed a lot of what was there before them. But lots of what was there first wasn't really the problem. It just attracted a lot of locusts. Now, there are obviously problems too. Now, again, that's not to say that skepticism beyond this mislabeled bunch is perfect. Far from it. It's not even to say that skepticism in the UK is perfect, because it isn't. And that's because skeptic societies are made up of people, and they tend to be part of actual society, and the problems with society are naturally going to be present in skepticism too. I mean, I do think skeptics tend to be more aware of things than the average group of people, but I can only talk about my own experiences, and obviously that comes with a load of caveats of being one of the people running the events or speaking at the events I'm at, and then being male on top of that, so obviously your mileage may vary.
It was something that stood out for me watching the videos of what happened in Milwaukee, was how far outside of my experience of what skeptic events is like. And that's probably a bias on my part, because the skeptic events I'm at, generally speaking, I'm running and organising and making sure that toxic shit like that is not going to happen. And if it looks like it's heading in that direction, we will move in there and we will close that down, because that's not the environment that we want to be cultivating. It's not what we want most of our skeptics to be about. It's not what we want QED to be about. So it was quite a surprise to see. I think living in my own skeptical bubble of the kind of skeptic societies that I interact with, and assuming that all skeptic societies are like that, and this has kind of come as something of a surprise to me.
Yeah, I can see
which it shouldn't have done, because I was aware that wasn't the case, but it did. It shouldn't have done, but it did.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around a lot of the skeptic societies in the UK and into other countries too, and I honestly think, and this is again only from my experience, my perspective as a speaker and a guy and that kind of stuff, but I'd be astonished if there was anything that resembled Milwaukee there. Now, there is still sexism there, and we've seen that at some of our events, but it's the smaller versions of sexism where some guy will assume that Alice isn't one of the organisers and come up and talk to one of the guys instead, even though Alice is in that conversation.
Yeah, which has happened.
In fact, actively interrupting me speaking and apologising to the bloke that I was talking to.
Yeah, exactly.
for interrupting my speaking.
And you've had other weird comments as well about
we had a guy asked me if I belonged to Mike.
Yes, which was nice. Specifically asking if you were property.
Are you Mike's? No. Are you anyone's? No.
So what does that even mean?
So, I mean,
it's everyday sexism that you were going to get in every realm of society.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't.
I don't think it should just happen, but it does just happen. You can't just say it's true of skeptics events. It's true of life. It's currently true of life, and we have to try and prevent it in ways that we can, which is something that QED does very well at doing in their event. Is you do a lot of work to try and make sure that it's a comfortable event for people and have policies in place to make people feel safe complaining about issues, but also siding on the person who is feeling uncomfortable and trying to help that situation, be it removing a person from the event or managing the situation as required.
And it's fortunate we have those policies and procedures in place, and we very rarely have to act on them.
Yeah, we've had to have very, very few conversations in 7 years.
The mere existence of the policies is enough to give people a steer as to what is expected and what is not expected.
Yeah, we expect you to treat people equally. We expect you not to do that. But I mean, you still get those kind of issues. And I mean, I'm not above making complete fuck ups myself. I know even last year at QED, I'd had a few too many drinks, and when Tom and Cecil were talking, I went over and joined in the conversation and realised after it was brought to my attention, I'd completely talked over someone who was talking, and a very, very smart, very lovely woman who pointed out to me that I was wrong, and I was like, horrified and like, oh shit, that's a terrible thing. And it's the kind of thing that you don't realise. You might not realise you're doing if you're not paying attention, but once you're aware of it, it's your duty to fix it and to not do that again. So we do have things that need to be better in UK skepticism, but I think it's not being Pollyanna-ish to say it's substantively different than having someone on stage in that kind of way. And I don't think that I could imagine being at a conference in the UK, Australia, Europe, or anywhere else I've ever been where someone is on stage, not just in spite of the prickish things that they've said, but specifically because of the prickish things that they've said. Mm-hmm. And I definitely can't imagine that happening, and then the audience actually cheering those prickish things on. Wherever UK skepticism is in dealing with social issues, we're not at that point. We're far beyond that point of having someone on stage because they're an arsehole and having the crowd cheer the fact that they're an arsehole in these ways. Still, there is one last point that I want to make, and it's that until this total embarrassment of a mess took place, I had absolutely no idea that Carl Benjamin was English. Sargon of whatchamacallit is English. He's from Swindon. I had no idea prior to this. And that, for me, makes it even weirder that I've never heard of him when he sees himself and his fans see him as a big skeptic. His name has literally never come up at any one of the Skeptics in the Pub groups I've visited around the UK. And I must have done 80 or more talks around the UK at this point. And I even know skeptics from near Swindon, and they have no idea who he is. They've never heard of him. They had no idea that's where he was from. And I think there's a good reason for that, or even several, if you include his toxic tone, his obnoxious trolling, his cheap contrarianism, his plastic provocatism, and his dumb conspiracism. It's the fact that he doesn't seem to in any way resemble a skeptic in his approach to his ideas or his critical thinking. Quite why a British accent gets him and Milo so much further in the US than it has ever done here, I don't know. I really don't know, and that's a problem that needs to be addressed over there, I'd say. Personally, I think there really has to be absolutely zero place in skepticism for people like Carl, or the style of pseudo-reasoning that he represents. But the fact that he's pretty much an unknown here suggests that we already kind of know that. America, please catch up.
You'd think now I'm giving my cancer talk all over the place, I'd be sick of talking about cancer. But it turns out I'm just finding loads of cancer stories at the minute.
I think once you find one cancer story, there's likely to be other cancer stories.
It spreads. It spreads. But this is quite an interesting one. So towards the end of last month, you might have seen a few headlines dotted around similar to this one from the Telegraph, which was prostate cancer treatment could cure men for whom there was no hope. Or from The Sun, cancer cure, pioneering form of radiotherapy can cure prostate cancer for men previously thought inoperable, trials suggest. It's quite a mouthful.
That's a long one for The Sun.
The media seemed pretty confident in their interpretation of a study from the Institute of Cancer Research in London. So the Telegraph said, a breakthrough in treatment for prostate cancer could cure thousands of men whose disease was thought to be incurable, research suggests. The Sun went a step further, after first pointing out that it was a British study for some reason.
That's The Sun, isn't it? Hashtag Brexit. We want none of that European science these days. We voted out.
Good old British prostates is what we're saying. We're saving British prostates.
From British cancer. Actually, I think The Sun is British cancer. I think The Sun is the British cancer.
So they said the treatment helped eradicate the disease when targeting cancer cells that had spread from the original tumour to pelvic lymph nodes.
Migrant cancer cells, you might say. You got all those East Europeans metastasizing over here. Taking our sugar.
Taking our blood supplies.
That's tickled me. The Telegraph went on to explain the need for a new therapy in prostate cancer, explaining that once cancer has spread to the pelvis, it's very hard to treat using our current treatment options due to potential damage to the surrounding tissues. Prostate Cancer UK has loads of information on the disease and say that treatment options for advanced prostate cancer, i.e. cancer that has prostate cancer that has spread, are limited to managing the disease and symptoms rather than removing it. Prostate cancer is kind of an interesting type of cancer. Although it's the most common cancer in men in the UK, with over 40,000 patients diagnosed each year, it's usually diagnosed very late in life and is so slow growing that it can be asymptomatic for many years. And even when diagnosed, often the best course of action is to just leave it.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Alice, because, you know, people in their 70s, if they get diagnosed with prostate cancer, they'll just leave it. They won't even bother treating it. Whereas if you're in your 20s and you get diagnosed with prostate cancer, that's a death sentence.
Yeah.
And that's specifically because people in their 70s have a better constitution because we're not poisoning our body with all the chemicals, according to Patrick Vickers from Gerson Therapy.
Correct.
Not because prostate cancer might take 20 years to kill you, and if you're 70, you probably don't have 20 years. And if you're 20, you definitely do have 20 years. Yeah, no, it's because 20-year-olds are less healthy than 70-year-olds.
My granddad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and it was like, he got prostate cancer, but we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
The chances of having it once you get past a certain age, the chance of having it are close to 1, aren't they?
Yeah, most men will have it.
Exceptionally high chance, and very little point in engaging in any treatment for
especially
it.
when the side effects of the treatment can be quite bad in
for
terms
exactly
of
that reason.
Incontinence and it's erectile dysfunction things.
Very unlikely to extend your life when you're that old anyway, and comes with a load of side effects.
Yeah.
And it's usually asymptomatic, so you might be diagnosed with it pre-symptoms. You may go for decades with no symptoms at all. You can live with it without it impacting on your life too much, other than you've got cancer.
I guess we're lucky that just those evil big pharma people aren't paying doctors to put elderly men into chemotherapy just in order to be able to sell them drugs.
Yes, yeah, it's a good job they're not doing that.
It's a good thing that doesn't happen.
But it can be obviously a symptomatic cancer. You can get symptoms which can be quite difficult to manage, but there are often medications that they can use to treat the symptoms rather than to treat the cancer. And we do have cancer treatments, but as you say, the side effects can be quite detrimental to the patients. When I say that we just leave it, we do what we call active watching.
Can you do passive watching?
Yeah.
Is that what you do for a magic eye? So relax your eyes fully to do a magic eye puzzle. That's passive watching.
It's what I would do to last the summer wine. I would just, when it's on, I'll wait for the bathtub to show up, and then I'd just tune out again.
I'll tell you what it is. You know when you didn't catch the latest episode of whatever TV show, but your friend tells you all about it? That's passive. It's like passive smoking. It's like passive watching. Yeah, I didn't see Game of Thrones, but I passively watched it through a friend of mine.
So basically, they will check how the cancer is progressing, and if it looks like they need to do anything about it, they'll do something about it. But mostly they leave it untreated and just keep an eye on the development over time. According to the American Cancer Society, overall prostate cancer survival rates are, this is including all stages of prostate cancer, the 5-year relative survival rate is 99%, the 10-year relative survival rate is 98%.
Good Lord.
The 15-year survival rate is 96%.
That's not bad.
15-year survival rate of prostate cancer is 96%.
Yeah.
Wow. You weren't kidding when you said it was slow growing.
Yeah. You can literally live for decades with prostate cancer, and you can live for decades and it'll be completely asymptomatic.
I guess it doesn't metastasize easily either then, because otherwise that would have cause secondary cancers that would
Correct.
more likely kill you.
I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that the 100-year survival rate is 0%, so it will get you.
But in some patients, the cancer grows quickly and is prone to spreading either to the lymph nodes or quite often to the bones. But even at this stage, prostate cancer can be managed. And when we break it down and look just at advanced prostate cancer, which is prostate cancer that is spread, that which is spread within the local area still has a 5-year survival rate of almost 100%. So if it's spread to areas within the pelvis, the lymph nodes...
That's what you mean by local. I thought you meant like if people in Liverpool have got it.
Just in the same postcode.
Yeah, I thought it was like when you see
local
adverts on
tumour.
websites. Like we got like these people in our local area have gotten cancer.
Local to the tumour. However, metastasis to distant sites reduces 5-year survival to 29%.
Okay, so if it is one that manages to metastasize, then you've...
But to be fair, that's true of a lot of cancers. Once it's metastasized somewhere far away, particularly if it metastasizes to, for example, the brain, then you're gonna struggle to treat it.
Yeah.
The study reported in the media was looking at treatment for cancer that had spread in the local area to pelvic lymph nodes. And the treatment, which was studied by ICR in London and reported in the Telegraph and the Sun, among other places, was looking at using high-dose localized radiotherapy called intensity modulated radiotherapy, or IMRT.
Marsha is trying to figure out how to pronounce that now.
Emirate.
Because I know how his brain works. When you read out an acronym, he's putting the letters together in case it says something funny or something.
It doesn't say funny. No, that's fine.
But like when you go into a computer and just as soon as you've typed like the question in, the answer comes up because computers are that fast. Marsh knew all of this within seconds of you finishing the acronym. He was like, "No, there's not a joke."
Yeah, it's already done. It's already fine. I don't even need to think about it. It's instinctive.
It just happens. Just drops out.
Like counting 5 things. You can. Is it like up to 7? You can count without thinking.
You can count without thinking about just there.
8 things you need to.
I can't.
Yeah.
How many monitors on that table?
3.
You paused. That's ridiculous.
My brain doesn't work in numbers.
That's amazing because there's clearly only 3 monitors. It's 3 things. How many monitors on the table behind it?
1. I can't see.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
1.
I'll give you the pause. All right. How many mics are sat there?
I can do 1. One's okay.
So can you do 2?
Probably.
Yeah. So 3's the problem.
3 and above. My brain doesn't work in numbers
That's
at
amazing.
all. Like I really struggle with recognizing numeric patterns and things. It's bizarre.
I mean, that might be a genuine brain thing. That I don't mean to say that I'm denigrating you here, Alice. But there's that thing where you get some cultures don't have words for numbers above about 5 or 6. They've got like 1, 2, 3, 4 and lots.
Do you think Alice doesn't have a word for number above 5? Alice, give me a number above 6.
Lots.
The thing that Warren likes to do is to make me add up single-digit numbers in my head because I'm really bad at it.
You still haven't given me a number above 6. This is embarrassing. It's fine. You're the only one here with a PhD. It's absolutely fine.
I just can't do maths. Anything numerical, I really genuinely struggle with. To the point where I've considered whether it's like an actual thing.
Well, I mean, what we could do is, Tom's baby, Rosalind, is probably getting to the point where she can count really well.
She can probably count as well as I can.
I think we should do at some point.
Count, okay. I can't.
Well, you can't count 3 on site.
Not on site. I don't.
I reckon Rosalind might beat you at counting things on site. I wonder at what point Tom's child will get better at maths than you. I think that's a measurable point. We'll have to keep up a little running competition.
She's what, 2 and a bit now?
She's 2 and a bit. You have to think about that then. Whereas anyone else could have just got that on the site.
I also write numbers the wrong way quite a lot. So I was having a conversation with Warren the other day about a Pokemon thing, and I'd asked him to check a Pokemon for me, and I gave him the CP number, and then he texted me back saying, well, it must be this if you've given me that number. I was like, oh no, I just switched the numbers around. It was actually this number.
Transpose the digits.
Yeah,
I do that all the time, though.
I don't do it digits, but what I do have, which is really weird, is let's say you write a sentence, and then you read the sentence back, and so hang on, I want to change a word in there. So you go back from the end of the sentence, you go back, and you insert the new word, read the sentence. Every single time I put the new word the wrong side of where it needs to be. But like reliably,
That's really
every
weird.
single time.
Okay.
And it only works if I'm editing something from the back. Like my brain goes, okay, I know it needs to go after the word to, but then I'm thinking after is the other side of it because I'm going backwards along the sentence. But I do it so often that it's becoming a real problem when I'm writing like tweets or anything, especially anything where I'm not going to bother rechecking it because you don't proofread your tweets. If it fits in 100, you hit go and then you delete it when you see the mistake. That's just quicker than rereading it to check.
So what we've established is you can't write, Alice can't count, and I can't talk to people.
Yeah, that's fine. But other than that, it's
Between the
fine.
three of us, we make a normal human being.
We do. And the thing is, Alice has got a PhD and I've got an English degree. So all those things that account, yeah.
Biologists don't need to do maths.
It's fine.
Biologists are notoriously bad at maths.
And I never used to have to proofread. I worked for an agency. I had people who worked for me who did the proofreading.
I have now lost my place, though. Give me one sec.
Well, I can't tell you where you were.
There
I'll find the wrong place.
So this type of therapy, the IMRT, is dependent on a piece of kit called a multi-leaf collimator, which changes the shape and direction of the beam according to the unique shape and size of each patient's tumour, directing the beam to give a high dose to the tumour cells and only a low dose to the surrounding normal cells, affording them some protection. So this therapy has been around for a little while now. In fact, this particular study started in the year 2000 and was published just last month. The study in question was published in Radiation Oncology under the title Phase 1/2 Dose Escalation Study of the Use of Intensity Modulated Radiation Therapy to Treat the Prostate and Pelvic Nodes in Patients with Prostate Cancer. The purpose of the study was to investigate the feasibility of dose escalation and hypofractionation of pelvic lymph node intensity modulation radiation therapy, PLN, IMRT, in prostate cancer. So basically the aim was to test the safety of the protocol.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So exclusively, not efficacy, just exclusively on safety.
Correct.
Oh, is that because they already knew about efficacy, or that's question number two?
Question number two.
Problem number two, not problem number one. Okay.
Correct. You can't really test if something works in people if you don't know if
you
it's
haven't
safe to give
done
it to
the
them.
safety.
Nah,
Okay.
fuck it. Do it first, then find out whether it's killing them.
I mean, we did that with thalidomide, and that
Yes, we
ended
did.
badly.
I mean, actually, it ended well. It's just the middle bit was really bad. It ended with him going, whoa, let's not use that anymore. So, I mean, it's all afterward, yeah.
The study looked at 447 patients enrolled between 2000 and 2010, split into 5 groups, each with radiation delivered to the prostate, combined with pelvic lymph node directed IMRT, according to 5 different protocols. Every patient was also treated with androgen deprivation therapy to reduce testosterone levels, since this hormone helps prostate cancer grow. Each group had variable patient numbers due to the nature of the study, with the smallest group containing 25 patients and the largest 138. A total of 426 were treated and 421 were available for the late-stage toxicity testing.
That's a huge variance in group sizes. Is there a good reason for that?
It wasn't done with randomization in mind. They took people, they enrolled people from 2000 to 2010. I think it was probably basically just we allocate people to group. There was no blinding on group allocation.
So as effectively
Doctors may have
just
just
safety,
said,
isn't it?
"Will
observational study effectively."
Exactly. So
Yeah,
doctors
okay.
might have said, "Well, you've got quite aggressive cancer. We're going to put you in this group with the really high dose because this cancer's going to go badly.
Yes,
Okay.
So
yeah,
you
that
might
makes
as well
sense.
give it a go." And the smallest group was the lowest dose radiation. So
Okay. Okay.
the study was designed to look at toxicity of the bowel and bladder and used externally defined criteria to assess toxicity. So they had 2 different criteria that they used from 2 different groups and used that defined criteria in order to assess toxicity. And the authors reported that the treatments met safety guidelines and bowel and bladder toxicity prevalence was stable over time. One patient died as a result of another undiagnosed cancer, but otherwise the safety was pretty good on the actual treatment. In their own words, the authors concluded, this study shows the safety and tolerability of PLN-IMRT. Planned phase 3 studies will need to demonstrate an increase in efficacy using PLN-IMRT to offset the small increase in bowel side effects compared with prostate-only IMRT. They did, however, also record 5-year survival rates.
Okay.
So disease-specific 5-year survival rates, i.e. all patients who did not die from advanced prostate cancer, were 92%, and overall 5-year survival rates were 87%. Disease progression occurred in 169 of 426 men, so 40% of patients. So across each of the groups, the disease-free survival and overall survival rates were Group 1, 38% disease-free. 76% survived. Group 2, 61% disease-free and 88% survived. Group 3, 70% disease-free and 92% survived. Group 4, 80% disease-free, 97% survived. And Group 5, 78% disease-free and 95% survived. So reasonably good numbers.
Okay, yeah.
Apart from that first one, which was 25 people in the very low.
They were very, very low dose.
Very low dose.
There's also very few people there, so it's hard to get good maths on it. Yeah.
But an NHS Choices article put this into more context, explaining this is an early stage trial, so the participants were not randomised to the treatment they received, and there was no comparison group receiving a different treatment. This stage of trial is important for looking at side effects and seeing if the treatment approach is feasible, but it can't provide good evidence for how effective the treatment is. That requires later trial stages. It's really important to note that we don't have this randomisation or the comparison group, because we can't say that the specific cancer types are distributed evenly across all groups. You might have had really bad cancer in one group and less bad cancer in another group. Just because the higher dose IMRT had higher survival rates doesn't mean it was because they were getting the higher dose IMRT. They might have also been a different subset population of prostate cancer patients. Or it could just be some bizarre quirk of this group organisation. By not randomising it, you just don't know. And by not being able to compare it to another treatment, then it's really hard to say whether it's this treatment that's working or general intervention. They were also having androgen deprivation and prostate-specific IMRT, in addition to the pelvic lymph node-specific IMRT.
But the study wasn't set up to assess efficacy in any way, so a lot of this actually doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's totally fine for what they were trying to study. They were trying to study safety, and they got their answer on that. Yeah,
the fact that the patients didn't all drop down dead, if they had all dropped down dead, okay, maybe this isn't safe for use in people.
In terms of safety, they met all the criteria that would allow this to be passed as a safe treatment, and they are ready to go on with stage 3 clinical trials. So all that being said, it is promising data that survival rates are reasonably good, and
but there's a lot of confounders that could mean that's actually
exactly.
And
as such, there are a number of stage 3 clinical trials ongoing or about to start, specifically looking at the effectiveness in advanced prostate cancer. And then there's other studies into the safety of different IMRT treatment protocols as a whole, which have allowed UK guidelines to be determined for using this treatment. So now IMRT in general is passed for approval for use in the UK. And then with time, we'll work out whether it's useful at all in patients with prostate cancer, and then whether it will be approved for use. But I still think there's harm in misrepresenting these data in the media. There's an increasing level of distrust in science and medicine as a whole. You only have to see debates about experts and how many patients choose not to follow conventional treatment plans. There's a problem with people not trusting scientists. Whilst it's really good to talk openly about medical successes, we need to be sure we're not getting ahead of ourselves, because if these treatments don't come to fruition, then it reinforces that distrust. In particular, I'm increasingly concerned at the number of overseas treatments that are promoted as cutting-edge therapies, which misuse the science from these exciting treatment options before they're ready for use in patients. And how many patients decide against conventional treatment in order to raise funds to travel abroad and undertake these treatments which are not ready for patient use, either because we have not optimized those treatments for the most successful efficacy, or because we have not fully assessed the safety of those treatments. it's a huge problem that patients will go over and use treatments that are not going to help, because I've seen in some cases people are fundraising to go abroad to use treatments that require very careful genetic testing of the patients and no evidence that the clinic that they're going to will do that genetic testing of the patients, in which case it is next to useless. Unless by luck that patient has the right genetic variability that treatment requires.
Yeah, you see others for like stem cell therapies, and it's like, well, last I checked, we weren't there, and certainly when I was seeing the fundraisers for it, we weren't there for it.
And we're not just talking about straight up quackery, like people raising money to go and have Gerson therapy or
exactly.
whatever.
It's legit science that we're not ready to use as a treatment, that is not going to be useful to those patients.
Yeah, because we're still figuring this out.
Yeah.
We're still, the reason it's not available on the NHS or generally available or whatever, the reason you have to fly overseas and go and do it as part of a clinical trial or whatever, is we're not there yet. We've not figured out.
Absolutely. There are cases when that's not always the case. There are some kinds of, for example, proton beam therapy that we've talked about before, where we just don't have the lasers in the UK yet. So sometimes you do have to go abroad, but you need to do that through your medical doctors. You need to speak to them and for them to say, well, actually, this clinic has this laser and they can do it, and the NHS won't fund it, but you can go there. Those are examples where it might be a legitimate use. But 9 times out of 10, it's people going away from their medical advice, going away from what the doctors have told them, and going abroad for a treatment that we're just not ready to use yet. So sometimes it is legitimate science just too early, and sometimes, like with the stem cells case, it's legitimate science badly misrepresented and used in completely the wrong way.
Wielded by people who don't necessarily understand what they're doing with it.
Or care. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So when we discuss science in the media or anywhere else for that matter, we have a responsibility to talk about it as accurately as possible and to not get caught up in black and white language of cures and eradication where it's not warranted.
So we got a comment through from a listener about something we talked about on the show a few weeks ago. If you remember, we talked on the show about, only in passing as well, we talked about the use of the word panties.
Was that in passing?
Why did you say that in a really weird voice?
Panties. Okay.
So I got an email through from a guy called Guy, who says, I was surprised to hear you disparage the American English word panties as infantile with no apparent sense of irony. We constantly have a sense of irony on that show.
Just always underlined.
Don't mistake us not pointing the irony out for it not being there.
Yeah,
because we are full of shit. So much so that I asked my British friend to make me a list, which I now present along their American counterparts, of your dialect obsessed with infantilizing everyday things.
Okay.
So he presented several words and their apparent American English translation. So I thought what I'll do is I'll read out what is the English word, and you guys tell me what that word means.
Okay.
Tell me what that word means. Okay. So initially, bevy.
Do you want to take this one?
Alcoholic drink.
Alcoholic
beverage.
Drink.
From beverage.
He's just got it down as drink, but alcoholic drink.
It's usually, well, in Liverpool it's used as an alcoholic drink.
It's also used as a verb, as a past participle verb. Oh, we got bevied.
We got bevied.
It's true, but you wouldn't say, I'm going to have a bevy and it's a Coke.
Soft drink.
Or a glass of water.
Or a cup of tea. That'd be mental. Imagine asking for a bevy.
No, you'd have a brew.
Do you want to get a bevy? Yeah, I'll have like one sugar. No.
You'd have a brew, but not a bevy.
Yeah, it's usually I've never heard it used as anything other than an alcoholic drink.
Yeah, it's weirder to go with bevied, which is literally drunk.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they've gone through to drink. It's a drink of the verb of taking a drink. The past participle verb of taking a drink being drunk. Is that right? A drink's a bevy, so you must get bevied.
We have lots of weird words for being drunk.
Yeah, but bevied is amongst the weirder just for its how it's evolved
bevied,
from beverage.
Trolleyed.
It's
leathered.
But it's as in beveraged. We've been beveraged. That's what it is, because bevy is short for beverage. Yeah. But then it's used to I
think that's
we'll get a bevy.
That's more reasonable than.
I think it's ridiculous because it's beverage. Oh yeah, it's gentrified.
We've been beveraged up.
We've been fully beveraged.
I think we need to bring that into common parlance.
Oh no, he was well and truly beveraged.
Utterly beveraged. So, Bevy, next one is footy.
Yeah,
Obvious.
sure, football. Yeah,
football or
I'd never say footy though.
Soccer, football.
I wouldn't say
specifically.
bevy.
All of these E words are quite Scouse. The
They are
Scousers
very
like to
Scouse.
put E's
Yeah.
on
Well,
the
he
end
said
of everything.
dialect, so I assume these are Scouse words.
Well, they're particular. I mean, some of them are Scouse, some of them are Northern. But
But if he's asked his mate for our dialect, he said. Do you know, so this is a little interesting thing. Do you know where soccer comes from? Not like who invented it.
No.
It was us.
Oh, was it
the American term?
association?
It's from
was it?
association. So it's an
Contraction
English
association.
term.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
associated football. They took association rather than the football bit.
Yeah.
And that's where that. Just as the same thing with gas and petrol.
So Butty. Very Scouse, Northern
very
one,
Scouse.
Butty. That
I'm not
one,
sure if
isn't
it's
it?
very Scouse. I think
pretty
it's
Scouse.
Scouse, but I think you'd get a butty in like Leeds.
Yeah, you would get it in other places, but it's more like universally used in Liverpool than anywhere
Yeah,
else. I think
yeah.
it's more just thrown in for variants everywhere else. But
For listeners who don't know, the Butty is a sandwich.
it's a sandwich.
Now, I don't know the derivation on this one. I don't know how you get from sandwich to Butty.
No,
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Well,
how
I
you-
said-
It's when you say butty, it seems really obvious that it's a sandwich, and they think,
Yeah,
but why?
Why do we get? How do we get from
That's
sandwich to Butty? How does that? How
Well,
does that
I'll-
The
actually do
only
a
time
thing?
I would ever use the word butty is in reference to a chip butty.
Apparently, let me see here. It's possibly from booty. That's not helped anything.
But why?
Oh no, it's not. It's from buttered sandwich.
Oh yeah,
From buttered
obviously.
sandwich.
Buttered sandwich.
Of course, it's from buttered sandwich.
It's a buttered
Butty
sandwich.
Buttered sandwich.
That's
right.
ridiculous.
Nobody calls the sandwich a buttered sandwich. Some people don't even have butter on their
No.
sandwiches.
But it's
Why would you go sarnie? I've heard sarnie plenty of times.
Chippy? This could be a couple of different things.
Oh, it could.
He's only got one thing down, but
A chippy. If I said, "Oh yeah, where's the nearest chippy?"
yeah,
you'd think I meant takeaway from fish and chip shop.
yes,
Yes.
fish and chip
Fish and
takeaway.
chip.
Yes,
Not where's the nearest carpenter.
not where is the nearest carpenter. That's true.
But I think that's because we don't really hire carpenters that much.
But if
People buy flat pack furniture way more, so you don't have as much woodwork done.
if I were to say we need to hire a chippy,
I'm not going to hire a chip shop.
then no one's confused and
No,
thinking that you want
But
to go.
that's because the context clues are heavier. But if you
Yeah.
remove all context clues, the assumption is
Chippy is
look
where
in the
you
phone
buy
book for a
chips.
chippy.
Yeah,
You're looking at a fish and chip shop, not a carpenter.
Or in Liverpool, it's where you get your Chinese takeaway from.
That's true.
Guy has got carpenter down as a translation,
Okay.
which is reasonable, but actually less common than
It's very-
chippy.
Yeah, much
to-
less common.
It
to
is.
mean chip shop. This is going to be a confusing one. Welly.
A Wellington boot.
It is not a Wellington boot.
But it should be.
The next one down is wellies,
Oh, okay.
which he's got down as a translation of boots, which is not true.
No, it's
a
Wellington boots.
very
It's
specific
Wellington boots. It is.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Rubber boots.
Rubber
big,
boots.
big, like calf length rubber boots. I mean, you can get ankle wellies, but I wouldn't call them wellies.
No, they're trainers.
So
Trainees.
excluding the rubber boots definition, what could welly be?
Give it a good welly.
Give it some welly.
Oh, I was going to
That's-
say like a baked Wellington. a beef Wellington.
no one says what you have for your dinner. A beef
I'm having
welly.
a welly. I'm having a welly. Oh, get on the welly, lad. Get on the welly.
I'm going the chippy for a beef welly.
Yeah. Yeah, because me carpenter does a great beef Wellington.
Elbow grease. He's got that as a translation of which welly. Give it some welly.
okay.
Give it some effort. Give it.
Oh,
some...
I don't know what it is. I would say like kicking or throwing something, you'd give it some welly, but I'm not sure. Elbow grease is like...
No, it is. It
would you
is.
use it that way?
Yeah.
It would never occur to me to use it that way.
Because you've only had it come up when you're playing football.
Yeah.
This one I've never heard of before. Gutties.
No, I've never heard that
Gutties.
either.
Gutties.
Is that a knife you'd use to gut a fish? That'd be gutty.
This is all new to me. Gutties. Never heard this one at
Never
all. It's
heard
down
it.
as tennis shoes.
No.
Trainers.
Like
Or
trainers.
trainees.
Hang on,
Sorry,
hang
I
on.
call it
Trainees,
trainees.
possibly.
In
Yeah,
Liverpool, it's
trainees is tennis shoes. Gutties is your Gutenberg press. if you've got a Gutenberg press, yeah, you got a couple of them. Oh, yeah.
Whack it in the gutties.
Whack it on the gutty, lad.
Argy bargy.
Oh, that's a bit
no,
of heave-ho.
What?
Bit of handbags.
Are we just trying to speak entirely in colloquialism
Yeah,
now?
in a different
opaque
colloquialism.
colloquialisms.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of handbags, isn't it?
And he then points out finally that we can't really deride the word panties when we call them undies.
We don't call them undies.
No.
I mean, it is a word.
Some
but-
people do say undies.
Yeah.
We can't
It's not in
deny
common
that the
use.
word undies is used for your
Yeah,
undies.
but I mean, it's a bit of a straw man to say that just because that word exists, we can't then criticise an equally infantile word that is
universally
word
used
Yeah.
in America.
There's
Yeah.
no one in America saying undies, and there's no one in America saying keks.
There's no one in America saying anything other than panties.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was a listener question. So yes, Guy, we do use stupid infantile words, but do what we say, not what we do. So if you've got a question that you want to send to us, podcast@merseyside.skeptics.org.uk. Also, the next show that we're doing, the very next show that they're doing, is the live show at QED.
It bloody is. The live QED one.
So that's going to be exciting. So we've got a couple of requests that we want listeners to help us out with on that show. One is, if you've got some listener questions, send them some listener questions, because
preferably silly ones.
we want to be able to talk about some silly things on QED and try and make the people in the room
Also, it's
giggle.
the kind of stuff that we can answer there rather than
Stuff
do a
that we have to
load of
go and
research.
research.
So we love it when you
and
send in
send us that
suggestions.
stuff anyway because it's useful. But
Yeah, we love sending suggestions for stories, and we pick through them more often than you might realise. But the kind of questions that if we were asked it on the spot, we might be able to react and come up with something too. If you're coming, even more reason to send us a question, because you can actually ask that question there in the room if we know that you're coming. So let us know if you're coming when you ask your question, and we're more likely to.
Although it's going to be
probably.
really awkward if somebody who's coming asks us a
don't
question and then don't come to the live show. And
It's all right. We'll just get someone who is there to
and then
pretend
we
to
say,
be them.
is this person in the room? And dead silence.
Okay, so if you are definitely coming to Skeptics with a K, let us know ahead of time. And then what we'll do is we'll set up with you. We'll just send you all of the listener questions. Then any listeners who didn't come, you can read that one out. Even if you end up doing all 10 of them or however many we do, absolutely fine. That's fine.
The other thing that we need to ask listeners as a favour for, so if you are actually coming to QED, if you're attending QED and you're intending to come to Skeptics with a K, what we would like you to do, if you are from a non-UK country, so we're not interested in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, England, we're not interested. If you're coming
Wales, we're not interested in you. That's a quote from Mike Hall. We are not interested in Wales.
Not interested in Welsh Wales.
In the past, we have had long conversations about British biscuits and ranking our British biscuits. We've had long conversations about British chocolates that have inspired people to go off looking for certain types of biscuits and chocolates in their local supermarket. But we are willing to have the tables turned. If you have products or snacks, those type of little things, nothing major, but nothing that's going to perish on the flight over, because we are going to eat these. We are willing to eat or drink what you bring to us. We know that the Australians often bring musk sticks. I've tried musk sticks.
We've had musk sticks. The Australians like to bring us Tim Tams as well.
Tim Tams are just penguins, that's fine, but musk sticks are pretty weird.
Were awful. Genuinely awful things.
If there is something that is native to your locality that you think would be interesting for us to try live at QED during the live show, we are willing to do that. Caveat. The caveat being Alice might not be. The second caveat being I definitely will. I'll eat anything at all. And
we'll try not to have too much crunching going on into the microphones.
We know from a Mind Body Spirit Festival that you will eat or drink anything that is shoved under your face.
Anything
by
that
anyone.
I'm convinced by other people is edible and drinkable. I will do. I won't necessarily be the first person to try something, but once it's tried, I am there.
So this is the final call, literally the final call for QED. There's no point in us sitting there in the live show saying, if you want a ticket to QED, you need to buy a ticket to QED, because you will already be in the room. So this is literally the final call for QED.
That's true.
QED is the annual conference that we put on in conjunction with the Greater Manchester Skeptics. It's a full weekend of science, reason, critical thinking, fun, partying, bands. We've got 12 main stage speakers. We've got 8 panels. We've got a movie track. We've got 3 workshops. There's Saturday night. There's 3 comedians. There's the Occam Awards. There's the Friday night. There's the pub quiz. There's Skeptic Camp. There's an awful lot going on. It's going to be absolutely brilliant.
There is very specifically Dave Anick, James Ball, Bookshambles Podcast, Robin Brown, Dean Burnett, Trent Burton, Danny Chambers, Helen Chersky, Brian Ego, Jeff Forshaw, Claire Freeman, Chris French, Elio Garcia, Gerardo Garcia, David Gorski, Mike Hall, Charlotte Harden, Bri Hermes, Alice Howarth, Deborah Hyde, Robin Ince, Incredulous, Helen Keane, Izzy Lawrence, Michael Legg, Anthony Bosco, Michael Marshall, Emma McClure, Natalie Newell, Tim O'Brien, Terry Ogden, Gavin Osborne, The Parapod, Alison Price, Carolyn Rand, Science Moms, Phil Scritton, Covington Apathy, Simon Singh, Skeptics with a K, Ginny Smith, Katie Steckles, Carol Tavares, Anthony Warner, Jeff Whelan, Andy Wilson, Sophie Wilson, Matt Winning, Richard Wiseman, Alex Young, and the Z-List Deadlist podcast.
And more stuff that we haven't even put on the website yet.
That's still technically true. Although it won't be when the show goes out, probably.
Tickets are £109. They're £75 if you're a student, if you're under 18. Ticket sales will be closing next week, so you need to get in there and buy your ticket right now. You can get your ticket by going to the website, which is qedcon.org. You can find QED on Facebook. You can find QED on Twitter. But yeah, come to QED. QED is going to be an amazing time.
I also want to plug the latest episode of Be Reasonable. We have Sam Osmanagic.
Yes.
Who is a chap who is described himself as an entrepreneur and businessman in Bosnia, who believes he has uncovered, in a metaphorical, not literal sense, because they are still very much covered, a load of ancient pyramids underground in Bosnia that are older than any pyramid in the world by thousands and thousands of years. They predate large parts of civilization and the existence of standing structure, which he believes has is not a particularly difficult circle to square, because he believes he has an theory on the origin of those pyramids that explains why they seem to be able to predate the existence of technology and culture and civilization. And you can hear all about that on the latest episode of Be Reasonable with Sam Osmanagic. So you can find that if you go to merseysideskeptics.org.uk/podcasts, or look for Be Reasonable on podcasty places.
I'm also doing Leicester Skeptics in the pub immediately after QED finishes on the Tuesday night.
Oh wow, that sounds like
Tuesday after QED. Wow, at least got a Monday off.
Yeah, I'm going to be knackered. If people don't come to QED and say hello to me and I can talk cancer at their faces, then they can come and see me give a talk in Leicester, and I'll talk cancer to multiple faces. It's at 7:30 in Duffy's Bar.
It is. It's a nice little place.
Aside from that, then, that is all we have time for.
I think so.
All that remains then is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We have been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.